In this tutorial, we are going to learn about MIDI on velocity commands and explore some musical applications of those commands. MIDI on velocity simply means a command that shows how hard a key is struck on a piano keyboard. The values can range from 0, struck softly, to 127, struck hard, with a total of 128 possible values. It's important to note that MIDI on velocity is not the same thing as MIDI volume. MIDI on velocity tells the synthesizer to emulate an instrument being played more or less intensely, to change timbre as well as volume. It's like the difference between a shout and a whisper. A shout is louder than a whisper, but also has a different timbre. A MIDI volume command only makes the sound louder or softer. So I have a little phrase here, played on a flute sample. It sounds good, it's in time, makes sense, but it's not very emotionally moving. Check it out. So it sounds to me like all the on velocities are the same. So if we open a playlist that shows velocity stocks for these MIDI events, we see they're all at the same level. We can look at the on velocity for these notes in different windows. We see them here in the edit window. We can also see them in a similar way in the MIDI editor. There they are. And we can see them in the MIDI event list. This first column under event shows the on velocity values. One other way we can see on velocity is actually the color of the notes in the piano roll. On the right side here, there are two color boxes. One of them allows you to color code the bars here to the different MIDI tracks. The other one allows you to color code to the on velocities. This bottom box, it's color coded to the on velocities. The top box, it's color coded to show different MIDI tracks overlaid in the same MIDI editor. So I'm going to choose the velocity one. Now let's look at a velocity change in all of these windows. I'm going to shrink this a little bit so we can have the MIDI event list on the side. And let's just grab a note at random. How about this note here? You can use the grabber tool for that. When I grab it, and as I move it down, notice in the event list the highlighted value is getting lower and lower. And if we look up here, the color has changed slightly. If I bring that up, watch the highlighted note in the event list and the color coding of the note at the top. Now notice it's dark red compared to this lighter red color. So there's a number of ways to see the on velocity. Lastly, as I'm dragging a velocity stock, notice the area here to the left. It actually shows you the event list value. Okay, so some different ways to edit those. You could also type it directly in the event list, and you'll see the velocity stock, jump, and the color change. Okay, what I'd like to do is make this sound more like an expressive musical phrase. Usually a phrase starts softer, gets louder and more intense by the middle, and then decays at the end, just like the way you speak a sentence. I could manually do that in the event list. Type a value, scroll down, type another value. Just kind of choosing these values at random, but getting more and more intense with each count. Okay, so it looks like I've done what's called a crescendo, where it gets louder over time. Let's see how this sounds. Okay, hopefully you could hear how the flute sound got more and more intense. Well, that's a good way to edit these velocities, and if I had just one I wanted to change, it's really easy to pinpoint it in the event list. However, if you're doing something over a period of time in many notes, this might be a bit tedious. So let's use the pencil tool to help us with that. I'm going to return back to setting all of these to the same value. I can actually do that quickly under the event operations, change velocity, set all to and give them a value, and now they're all back to the same value. Okay, to use the pencil tool in the MIDI editor for velocity, I want to first make sure everything is selected. So I could simply do select all Apple A, or drag the crosshair tool over all the notes like this. That selects them all as well. And I'm going to click and hold the pencil tool. It will show me a few shapes. Now these are the shapes that the pencil tool will follow as I draw. I could leave it free and just kind of scribble around. If I choose line, it will force the pencil to draw in a straight line. That might work nice for a crescendo and a diminuendo. So I'm going to choose that. Go down to my first velocity stock, start really low, and gradually drag the pencil up. So it's loud here, and then same here. Maybe start with this one, bring her up. I don't want them all louder. Notice that when everything was selected and I dragged it, it took everything up. There, more like that. And you can see how it's following that straight line. And let's get this last guy here to be lower. Maybe I'll use the event list for that, because it's the first note, and I'll give it a low value. Okay, now let's hear if my phrase sounds more musical. To me, that's much more expressive.